Well, hey friends, it's Abdu Murray, and welcome to another episode of All Rise. You'll notice something. I'm sitting in the room alone. Derek is not with me. Derek is with us. He's just no longer with us right now. He will be joining us again in future episodes, so don't fret. He's just not able to join the podcast this time, so you're stuck with just me. So you'll be missing the humor that Derek brings. Hopefully we can make up for that a little bit during the course of the show, but I am really excited about this episode of All Rise. Joining me on the program today is David Shapiro, and I want to preface why I'm excited about this. I got about 15 reasons why I'm excited, but the main reason I'm excited about having David on is because David shares a background that has this bizarre, paradoxical commonality with me. He didn't grow up a Christian, and I didn't grow up a Christian. I grew up a Muslim, and David grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home. And we both found Christ, and we both recognize, yes, Yeshua as an Arab and Yeshua as a Jew, that he is the Messiah. And we did it through various means and through various different ways we came to, but the commonalities are eerie, which to me speaks to something that I think is really quite cool in terms of the way God draws people from divergent and sometimes seemingly opposed backgrounds to himself and fulfills the scripture that says that he has destroyed the dividing wall of hostility and made in himself one new man, which is us, through himself, because of what he's done. So anyway, with that in mind and that little short background and introduction, David Shapiro, David, thanks for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure to be on with you, on yours, and I'm really excited to have you on ours and share your story. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's a great intro. It definitely is a position in my life I never thought I would be, which is being announced as a former Orthodox Jew who's now following Christ.
You know, it seems to me that I was thinking about like a former Orthodox Jew and a former Muslim come on a podcast. It sounds like the start of a joke, you know. And while there is some humor involved, it is quite serious. So so you never thought you'd be here?
No, absolutely not. I mean, listen, Jesus has his own way of doing things in this world. And for me, growing up the way I grew up, and then actually I went from Orthodox Jew to atheism, spent, about 20 years as an atheist before Jesus came knocking on my door. And I'm honestly privileged and blessed that he did. I can't imagine life now without believing in him. I remember it. I just can't imagine it anymore. So yeah, I'm just blessed to have had that upbringing.
It's so funny you say that, David, because that's exactly how I feel. It's like I'm 52 years old. Pretty soon, I can say in my bio, for most of my life, I lived as a Muslim. I became a Christian at the age of 27. When I reach 54, it'll be half of my life. But seriously, I remember life like that. But thinking of myself spiritually as a non-Christian is in one sense I understand it and I get it 'cause I come from that background. But it's hard for me to fathom myself that way because of the depth and newness of my identity seems perpetually new in some senses. So it's funny you say that. So I do want to understand though, because when you said you went into atheism for 20 years, which is a fifth of a century. That's a long time to spend in a particular worldview to come out of that. Whose story you remind me of in a tangential or superficial way is Ayaan Hirsi Ali. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali was a Muslim, left Islam for various reasons, ended up just immersing herself into atheism, where she was a spokesperson for sort of the so-called new atheism, very hostile to religion, but then found Jesus in 2023, I believe it was, in October or so of 2023 is when she announced that she had become a Christian, and now she's a voice for Christianity. And I made the joke one time I was doing a dialogue with an atheist. It wasn't necessarily a joke, it was pretty serious. I quoted Ayaan Hirsi Ali as atheism had no answers to the biggest issues of life. And I said, and this is somebody who's gone through two more worldviews than either me or my atheist counterpart had went through. So you actually have one additional worldview than me to your repertoire of experience. So explain that, Orthodox Jew to atheism, before we get to the Christianity part. Talk about that, because I hope there are plenty of agnostics and atheists who are watching who were like, okay, two religious guys talking. No, there was a period of time, a substantial period of time where an entire adult from birth to being 20 would have developed while you were an atheist. So you got a lot to say about that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, honestly, as an Orthodox Jew, I grew up that way. It was my childhood.
Yeah.
I wasn't very good at it. I kind of tell the story that when I went to Hebrew school, I didn't love it. So I also grew up with dyslexia. So I couldn't understand it. And trying to learn Hebrew with dyslexia on top of English was just horrendous.
Oh, wow.
So I put a note on the door of the shul, of the temple, saying that school was closed this day. And I went home and I did that. So that way, if my mother went and checked, she would see the note there. So I did things like that. I just wasn't a really great student, but I grew up around the tradition of Judaism. And I think that when you are in a Jewish, especially an Orthodox Jewish household, reverence of God is one thing, but you are, I mean, almost instantly pushed into this world of this is what you have to be. This is who you are. This is the neighborhood you live in. This is the one shop you go to for these things. It's very insular. And that's just what life was. And for me, I understood life being that way. I just didn't connect to God that way. And I remember going to temple with my grandfather and everybody's there davening and he's there reading really fast. And I'm looking around, I'm going, man, everybody here is really connected with God. And I just want to go and play basketball. I didn't want to be there and I didn't feel any connection. And I was proud to be Jewish. I think that was kind of ingrained in me. But I wasn't close to God. And in fact, I didn't even understand what God was. And in Judaism, you know, if you write in your prayer book, that's a problem. If you drop your yarmulke on the floor, you have to pick it up and kiss it. There's no room for not having a relationship with God. And for me not to have it, I just figured, well, this isn't it. I'm not it. Something's wrong. So I kind of moved into atheism. And with that, I leaned on science. And I said, I'm in secular school. Science proves there's no God, even though it really doesn't now. I know that. Then it was God is one thing. And that's great for people who don't have hope. And then there's science and the real world. And that's where I'm going to live. And I spent 20 years. And when I say in the real world, I kind of had the same, I think, approach that most people have, which is, hey, I'm a good person. So if there is a God, God will be fine with me because I'm good. But really, I didn't understand what that relationship even was. And I kind of turned into a life of extreme sports and adrenaline. I jumped out of planes. I joined the military. I became a professional Muay Thai fighter.
Wow.
I just kind of went into this extreme, covered myself with tattoos, which now I understand I was trying to cover up hurt and pain. I was covering up self-esteem issues. If you look at the tattoo, you're not looking at me. So it was it was just, my whole life was, I felt like it was good. I was doing everything right. I had a job and I'm a military guy and I'm feeling good. And, you know, the tattoos just make me look good. And I felt okay.
Yeah.
And then one day my mother had cancer. She'd gotten cancer. And when I say she had cancer, for 10 years, the doctor said, you're going to die any day. It's so aggressive. You're not going to survive more than a couple of months for 10 years. And a week before she passed, she accepted Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior.
Wow. Were you a believer at the time?
No.
Okay.
I thought she needed comfort. She was going to die. This is why she used it. And then I started thinking about him going, but she was supposed to die for 10 years. So she would have accepted him at any point. Why now? And I couldn't put my finger on it, except this Jewish woman accepted Christ. It was very bizarre for me. And even then I chalked it up to, this is some sort of brain activity happening. And she leaned on Christ, and that's fine. That's great because she died in comfort, but I'm going to go back to my normal life. And probably about, it had to have been about 6 years to the day, I woke up and I looked at my wife and I said, I need to go to church. And she said, what? And I said, yeah, I need to go to church. And she's an Irish Catholic. She was born Irish Catholic. I was atheist, so I didn't care. She was I was like, oh, great. You have your own belief system. It doesn't matter to me. And I woke up and I said, I have to go to church. And she was blown away and I was blown away. And I sat in the back, and the pastor talked about a heavenly father that loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from a home where my father was very abusive.
Mm.
And what do you mean there's a father that loves me? And that was it. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember anything else other than listening to this pastor talk about the father who loves me.
Mm-hmm.
And I started leaving, and a different pastor said, hey, have you ever read the Bible? And as a Jew, I'm like, yeah, but not yours. I read mine.
Yeah.
So he said, let me give you the full Bible. And he put a full Bible in my hand,
Mm-hmm.
Old and New Testament. And he said, just start reading it. He goes, why don't you start with the Gospels? And next week when you come, let's just talk. He goes, just start with Matthew and we'll talk next week.
Mm-hmm.
I came back next week and I ended up taking off a week of work and I read the entire Bible front to back.
Wow.
And again, being dyslexic as well, this is not an easy task.
No, absolutely not.
But I could not put it down. It was, I have awful movie references, but it's as if you saw Harry Potter, the first one, and you just saw that over and over and over and over. And like, well, how does it end? What happens to this kid?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get the ending.
Mm.
And I'm reading the entire thing going, I have been stuck on chapter 1 forever.
Wow.
And now I get chapter 2.
Yeah.
And I read it 3 more times in the first month.
Wow.
And that was it. I went back to school. I went to Bible school. I said, I have to learn more about this. Weekend church wasn't enough for me. And I've been on this journey ever since.
That's, boy, I have a lot of questions now. But that's terrific. I mean, that's just amazing. In terms of the sheer effort it takes to read it that many times through, in that short a time has this, and I've heard this from folks before who have been like, where has this been my whole life? Even though you know it exists, where has this been my whole life? And it's not a universal experience, obviously, and I think there is some level to which I think it's not just biochemistry. I think it's the Holy Spirit who speaks into your life and then gives that sort of motivation to get into this kind of a thing. And I think I hear your story, there's no sense of the loss on me of the poetic nature in which here's a person who struggles with reading and is now reading one of the most dense books in the history of the world multiple times through and can't get enough of it. There's something about that redemptive picture in my mind in your own story, which doesn't prove anything true. It doesn't mean it's cognitively the way it actually is. It hints at the miraculous. It hints at the sublime to me, that someone who would have a hard time reading any piece of literature goes through a book that has various forms of literature, sometimes within the same kind of book, and 66 of them, and goes through all of them that intensely. That's just really, really something to me. The kind of atheist you were, was it more of was it more of a I'm trying to think of the best word for this, not laissez-faire, but like there's an atheist who's like, yeah, there's probably not a God and I don't really care to know, or was it like, no, I actively believe that there's no good reason to believe in God and I'm going to talk about that whenever I get a chance? Like, how would you characterize you as an atheist? Hey, I hope you're enjoying the show. And before we go any further, I just want to say this. If you're watching this and enjoying the conversation, we'd love for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss future episodes. Now, believe it or not, about 90% of the people who watch our videos aren't subscribed. And if just a fraction of you hit that button, it would make a huge impact for us. It's one simple, totally free way to support our ministry and help others discover thoughtful Christian content in a culture full of conflict, one that's searching for meaning. So go ahead, subscribe, like, and share. It really does help us out. And now, back to the content.
Oh no, I was an atheist that was going to prove it to everybody who thought that there was a God. And I think that it came from two different moments of my life. One was as a Jewish person, everyone says, well, why don't you believe in Christ? And I said, I didn't know about Christ. It wasn't something like you're sitting down in shul and they're going, hey, there's this guy, Jesus, and you shouldn't believe in him.
Yeah.
We just weren't taught who Jesus was. And the first time I ever heard the name was when I was in secular school and there was a Christian, and I remember he was wearing a cross and he was mad at me because my people killed his God.
Oh, wow.
And it was the first interaction I had, and I was like, wow, I don't even know who this is, but my people killed him. Like, what? I don't know if that's true. If it is, I'm not even sure how I feel about that. But I became almost, with my self-esteem issues, I became very angry at the fact that I was now part of a group of people that would kill somebody else's God.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt awful about it. So I didn't want to be associated with religion in any way.
Mm.
And then the other part of that was, I think because I felt inadequate, I felt like I couldn't connect with God, that I needed to shout on top of the world that he doesn't exist, because I didn't want there to be something wrong with me. And that's a theme I struggled with most of my life, is if it's wrong with me, I need to point fingers to somebody else and go, no, it's actually wrong with you. There is no God.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting this incredible, it's interesting, but at the same time, I had this incredible fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had that fear, it was, well, God doesn't exist. I'm going to prove to you that God doesn't exist. And my fear is real, because there is no heaven afterwards. And just every step of the way, it was, what drove me was my own emotion and my own feeling of inadequacy. And I was going to push that onto everybody else and refuse to listen to their point. It was just, I'm going to lay on all of the different science and history that I know of, that I thought I knew of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to push that down somebody's throat to stop them from being better than me.
Oh, so, boy, wow, that last bit, I had three questions in my head, and that last bit threw me a little bit, because that's so, well, I guess it does fit into the thing I was going to say, is that one of the things I've mentioned in some of my books, in Grand Central Question, for example, but also in some of the talks I've given on the reasons why people reject, or at least are resistant to, the Christian faith. There are the intellectual objections, but oftentimes the intellectual objections are more of a smokescreen for the thing that's really going on. In fact, there's a study I cited. Now, this is an older study, because the book was published in 2011, I believe it was, when that book got published, my second one. Julie Exline out of Case Western Reserve University wanted to do a study on anger levels towards God across denominations, and just very curious as to what various religions and what denominations within those religions allowed people to express their anger towards God. It's part of a thing on forgiveness and redemption and all that. She was studying this whole thing. And she used atheists as part of the group, just as a curiosity, maybe a control. I don't know what it was exactly. And what she found was remarkable, is though various denominations recorded these different levels of hostility, or not hostility, anger levels towards God. The highest level was among atheists, who would claim he didn't exist, but were super angry at God, not angry at religion. It was very important. It wasn't angry at religion or the concept of God. It was actually at God, where she coined the term emotional atheist, which doesn't mean a atheist who is this emotional person. It means that emotion fuels the atheism, at least to a significant degree, where people they didn't so much disbelieve that God exists so much as God is dead to me. And it reminded me of a line from Elie Wiesel's Night, where he talks about that night, the first night he ever arrived at Auschwitz, where he was separated from his sister and his mother, and his father and him were there. He never saw his sister and mother again, and he says, "Never shall I forget that first night where he saw the smoke, that is, of the crematorium, and the flames that consumed his faith forever." And he said, "I didn't disbelieve that God existed. I simply disbelieved that God was just and good." And so in that's what died. So he felt like Job in one sense, but Job didn't deny God, whereas Elie Wiesel felt he couldn't believe in God's goodness anymore in light of what he was experiencing. I say all that because it sounds, well, that's not the exact parallel to what you went through. It sounds like there was this latent, you had built the emotion, the intellectual reasons to disbelieve in God on top of the real reasons.
Yeah. Yes. Which I didn't even know what the real reasons were. And what's interesting is, it's funny you brought up Job. I might be one of the only pastors in the world who doesn't think Job was as righteous as they say.
Oh.
Only because if you look at the story of Job, he is telling you what God is,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't actually have a personal relationship of crying out to him until the end.
Yeah.
So when you look at him, I go, that was me. I'm there going, yeah, God can give and take away. I know there's this big guy in the sky who is far away, but he's in control of everything.
Mm.
And it was at the end where he starts crying out saying, now you're my personal God. Now we're in relationship together. And that was my life. I went from this faraway God that I couldn't feel or see or hear, but I knew about. I knew he was there because I was being taught about him, to now I'm rejecting you because you're not coming down and meeting me.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
Mm.
And then at the end, it ended up being my emotions that cried out. And although I went the logical route and I tried to learn about apologetics and I try to understand how my brain works, it really was my emotions, it was my heart that cried out to him first and said, I'm broken. And not realizing how I was even broken then, just going, I'm broken in so many different ways, living a life that I thought was great.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going, all right, what do I do? Because now I'm in this with you.
Yeah.
And you're here and I don't know where to go from here. And he has led me on this amazing journey and put people in front of me and mentors and just these incredible speakers that I've been able to listen and spoken to my life. And it was one of those, you are here. You talk about the miraculous of reading the Bible, having dyslexia. I look at it and said, I went back to school. I failed out of school when I was younger, not once, but twice. And I tried to go back again when I was in my early 30s and again, couldn't navigate it.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I went back to school and I got my bachelor's and then my master's, and then I just finished my doctorate. And I'm going, if that's not a God miracle thing, I don't know what is.
Wow. Well, because dyslexia isn't the kind of thing that tends to get better on its own. That's really interesting. Wow. Okay, so I want to come back to Job in a second, only because, but I also want to talk about that moment for a minute where you woke up and I need to go to church. Because the thing you could have done, and remind me about the Job things. If I forget, I want to make sure I ask you a question about that.
Okay.
'Cause I had some thoughts about the Job stuff relative to an atheist who the book of Job is the reason she left the faith. So, which I find interesting. So I don't want to forget that. But, what could have happened and what logically easily could have happened is you return to the familiar. So you could have woke up that day after your mom had passed and you had rationalized she just... she wanted to get out of jail free card, or it was synapses firing in the middle of the death throes, or whatever her body's going through. You could have said, I need to connect with God again. I need to go back to my Jewish roots and maybe the Orthodox Jewish roots as well. And, synagogue could have come up on your lips, but church did. Do you know, sitting here today, and sometimes people don't know why it was church and not synagogue?
I think two things. One is I've been to synagogue. I knew what it was. And it's interesting because we'll get into it later, but a book that I wrote that will be coming out in a year, it reminded me a lot of that moment of I am just going through the motions in a synagogue and it's not just me anymore. I looked at it going, it's not just me. When my mom passed, she was buried in a Jewish cemetery. And I went to a synagogue and I said, they need a letter at the cemetery saying that she went here so she can be buried, even though she had not gone anywhere for 10 years. She'd been bedridden. And they said, okay, for $500, we'll write the letter. And I did it. And looking back now, I'm going, man, Pharisee is alive and well still today. And I don't mean it in a nasty, negative, derogatory way. I'm just saying this is the way life has become for me. And when I looked at synagogue, it was filled with people that were not as close to God as I thought they were. And I started looking at moments of my life and what things happened that caused me to want to know what this is. And one of them was military. When you go to the military, I don't care if you're religious or not, you become religious pretty quickly because you're in some serious situations and you need God to protect you.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got there, there's a Bible. It's about that big. It's a small Bible. They call it the Bulletproof Bible. And you put it in your breast pocket. And the reason they call it that is there have been stories of soldiers being shot with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
The bullet would enter into the book and it would stop from going into their heart and they'd be alive.
Wow.
So they call it the Bulletproof Bible.
Wow.
And they handed it to me and I put it in my shirt pocket and I had it there and I was convinced that it was going to save me. And I didn't even know what was in it. I never opened it, never read it. But I think there were moments like that in my life where Jesus was calling out, was preparing me. So when I woke up, the only thing that came to my mind is church. It wasn't synagogue. It wasn't, hey, let me try to do some meditation. Let me do some yoga. Let me try to find some peace. All the different things I would have done. Being in martial arts, I've done Tai Chi. It wasn't let me meditate and do some Tai Chi movements.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I woke up and I was 100% convinced I needed to go to a church. Again, one of those God miracle things that I don't know if I'll be able to explain other than that was where I needed to go at that moment.
Well, as the scripture says, no one comes to the Father, but he first draw them. And clearly he was drawing you. I will say there, again, I don't know if I over poeticize too many things, but I got to say, in addition to the poetry, the fact that you rifled through the New Testament, the Bible, despite the fact that reading was a challenge, I was just reading in the Bible about, keep the law close to you as bindings on your hands and as frontlets on your forehead. And of course, a lot of Orthodox Jews will literally bind it on their hands and literally have the phylacteries on their foreheads or put the mezuzah on the doorpost in a literal obeisance to what the Bible says about where the word should be.
Yep.
The poetry of the fact that an Orthodox Jewish background person has, without believing in it, a Bible not on his forehead, not on his arm, but right next to his heart, that is moved of the heart to go to the institution that has brought an Old and New Testament together is super Jewish to me in some ways. I realize my Jewish friends might be like, that's so not Jewish. I'm like, well, it kind of is, because it sounds like the Bible is saying, put this thing on you, and you literally wore it. And
Yes.
believing it would protect you, and then you retreated to it at a time when you needed it spiritually. So,
and I did wrap tefillin. I used to wrap tefillin. I used to have the prayer shawl. I did, like I said, growing up Orthodox, I did everything that was meant for a Jewish person to connect to God. And it when I tell you it connected me with my people, the Jewish people,
Mhm.
but never with God. And then I think because of that, you're right, that when I read it now and I go, God on your heart, it's not about a scripture written on a piece of paper that a rabbi blessed in a box next to my heart,
Mhm.
because God's not calling that person to be on my heart. He's calling himself to be on his heart. One of the things that really draw me all the time is when I look at free will versus reverence, the free will matters because love matters.
Mhm.
Reverence matters because relationship matters.
Mhm.
When you put them both together, when you have the reverence of God and the love of God, you have love and relationship together.
Mm.
And that's what God did at that moment. He goes, hey, you have the reverence of me, but never the love.
Mm.
And now I'm going to combine them where you're going to have your relationship with me along with the love that I'm going to show you that's out there that you've never experienced in this way. And that was ultimately why church needed to be the place. I would not have gotten that, I believe, anywhere else in the world.
So this makes me think of something I think I shared on your show as well, on your podcast as well, is that, for me, God spoke to me through, and I don't mean literally, I didn't hear any audible voices or anything like that, but he drew me, I should say, to himself by the things I already was raised to care about as a kid. So one of the phrases that, and again, some of the parallels are a little spooky, between sort of Islam and Judaism, in the sense that there are traditions that parallel each other. Not only the dietary laws and, whether Ramadan is sort of a borrowing of Yom Kippur and the various other fasting festivals and feasts, and inverse sort of feasts of Judaism, but we have a phrase. So you have the Shema, right? In Judaism, it's such an important phrase that it has a name. in Islam, you have an important phrase that has its own name. You have the takbir, which is Allahu Akbar. It's such an important phrase that it's got a name to it, just like the Shema has in Hebrew and in Judaism. So you have this sense that phrases mean something important, and it means God is great or God is greater. So for me, God drew me to himself by pointing out that the things in Christianity I thought insulted God's greatness were the very things that demonstrated God's greatness, the incarnation, the Trinity, and the cross. For you, I don't want to speak for you, but what I see is wrapping tefillin and having the prayer shawl and having this whole thing of it literally close to your heart. God wove a pattern of poetry where he actually puts it in the military close to your heart, and then you literally wake up one day and need this thing. I just find that I don't want to impose on your story something that isn't there. But
No, it part of my experience and my journey was learning things along the way and learning, where you look out and you go, why can't it be this and that? So why can't it be, hey, this is my story, and you go, hey, God's been tugging at your heart, literally and symbolically, in this beautiful poetic way, your whole life. And I go, you know what? You are right. I might not have put it that way, but it is 100% correct. And he still continues to do it today. And I am, one of the things that kept happening while I was going through my education is my wife and my brother would say, what are you going to school for? What's the end game here?
Yeah.
I said, I don't know. I just want to learn more about this. I really don't know where this is going. And then I went for my master's in biblical archaeology, and they're going, that's such a weird, hard subject. Why are you going for that? I go, I don't know. I feel led, and I'm just following his lead, and that's it. And I kept going and going. And today somebody will go to me and go, okay, well, what's your ministry and what are you looking to do? And I'm going, I still don't know. Maybe when I grow up, God will tell me, but right now I'm just enjoying the ride and doing what he's putting on my heart, because he has led me, like you said, poetically, he has led me by my heart my whole life. And even more poetic is he took away the ability for me to use my brain for most of my life in order for my heart to be enhanced. And the only way I can describe that, if someone's blind, they have better hearing and all of that. And I'm going, I'm dyslexic because of a reason, because he's going, hey, I need you to feel this with your heart. I need your heart to be this strong, because that's the only way you would have been convinced throughout your entire life that I exist. And man, was he right. And then the moment he was right, he was like, okay, I'll give you your brain back, I hope.
Well, that giving you your brain back has resulted, and you alluded to it earlier, but there's a publication, the title is awesome. I'm just going to say it. It's going to sound irreverent, but I like the way because it's not irreverent. It's actually quite reverent. The title of a forthcoming book, which I believe you said is 2026?
It's going to be January or February of 2026.
Okay, it's called Jesus Christ. That's a lot of evidence. I love that. And then The Pharisee I Didn't See, coming soon as well. And then if people want, they can get on your website at drdavidshapiro.org. Again, drdavidshapiro.org. We'll put it in the notes and put it in the description. Is the Shapiro paradox, which they can get right now. But stay on the lookout for coming soon. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of evidence, and The Pharisee I Didn't See. So the switching on of the brain has resulted in quite a bit of output as it stands. So that's quite good. So let me pivot then back to Job, because I didn't want to forget. And this is just more of a thoughts thing. This is not necessarily, I'm maybe putting you on the spot. I hope I'm not. But I read an excellent book, and it's by an atheist. And I thought it was one of the most thoughtful books I read in a long time. Because as we record this podcast and this YouTube show, I've finished writing my book forthcoming called Fake ID, and it's about the idea of two things coming together, what I'm calling AI mania and a thing called bioclasm, which is the idea that you can take, it's basically a gender ideological issue that takes biology and says, don't believe your own eyes. And AI mania is getting to the point where we can't believe our own eyes because we don't know even what we're looking at and what it means to be human. And these two things converging to collapse reality as we know it. Now, I'm not against AI. I use it all the time, but it's not the silicon of the AI, it's the soul of the human using it. That's the issue for me.
Yeah.
Having said that, I had to do a lot of reading on AI. And one of the books that I read was called God, Human, Animal, Machine by Megan O'Geeblin, who is a former Christian who writes for Wired and various things, and she's been all over the place, and she's extremely bright and extremely thoughtful. And she actually laments her loss of faith because she says in the book that despite her secularity, so to speak, and living in New England and all this, she finds that the conversations she has with her secular friends aren't as deep as the conversations she had while in seminary and in her religious education, which I think is, one, refreshingly honest, and two, fascinating, because it's often the religious people who are considered the sort of empty-headed, shallow dunderheads, as it were.
Yep.
I bring her up for a reason, and the reason I bring her up, and I brought her up on this podcast numerous times because I like this book so much, because it's this thoughtful, and AI features heavily in it, but it's a thoughtful journey through her search to find meaning, and technology at the end of it kind of might be the source of meaning for her. And she doesn't really disclose it until one particular part of her book where she talks about the book of Job. And at some point, she feels like the book of Job reveals a God that she has a hard time believing in could possibly exist, not because he unleashes suffering on Job and allows Satan to do all these things, but because Job asked legitimate questions and got zero answers. And it seems like that was the greatest travesty, that he didn't get any answers and he was entitled to them given what he had gone through and maintained his loyalty to God. I have a view on this that I think is not the only view I have on it, but given that you brought up Job, and you've gone through your share of suffering before you became a believer, and I'm sure since. What's your take on that? On the idea that Job was entitled to answers, and in the most genteel way possible, if you were to speak to someone like that and they were to say, my issue is, it's one thing for God to do something because of his sovereignty. It's another thing to say, I did this to you, and I'm never going to tell you why. What do you think about that whole thing and Job's suffering and relative to all that? Because you had an opinion about Job and then his relationship with God at the end. What do you think?
So one thing is, God doesn't rule, he relates. He doesn't control, he calls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is when people are looking for answers, or they say, hey, God is not giving me the answer, or Job the answer that he deserves or that he wants, I'm going, well, whether you're an atheist or a believer, you're not going to get the answer that you want or deserve regardless. Mm-hmm. So it's easier to blame somebody if you go, okay, God, I'm going to blame you because now you're an entity out there and you should give me the answer. It's kind of, we have some gall to say, hey, creator of everything, you deserve to give me an answer. One of the things that I look at when I look at the story of Job that, and again, I'm looking now from Jewish eyes as well. And the Jewish eyes is Satan, not Satan, not the Satan that we know in Christianity. Satan, which is originally when Job was written, is somebody who goes to God's court. And again, if you start thinking about it, you go, well, if Satan was kicked out of heaven, why is he there talking to God? In Jewish tradition, he was not kicked out of heaven. He is not Satan that we know of. He is somebody who's there to oppose. He's the opposition. So he's there saying, I'm just doing what I do, which is I'm doing this. And God, if this guy is so righteous, I guarantee you, if I pull away the things you've given him, he won't believe in you anymore. So he's doing what he does, which is accusing.
Mm-hmm.
God, we look at God going, how could you possibly allow him to do that? And you go, but God gave him some rules. And he said, you can't kill him. If you look at it, he doesn't take away his wife. He doesn't take away his life. Mm-hmm. And some people go, yeah, but he took away his children and his cattle. And I get it. But when two become one after marriage, he did not destroy the one. He wasn't allowed. So Satan knew, I can't destroy the wife either. That would completely break him. It's somebody will look at it and go, oh, great, God saved somebody's life. But he still allowed all this bad to happen. I'm going, bad happens regardless. Bad is going to happen because we have free will. And bad is going to happen. So if God is actually protecting the accuser from doing even worse harm than he would have, that would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then afterwards, if we go, God, I need you to explain to me why you did not allow certain things to happen. What we're doing right now is we're putting a handcuff on God saying what you did was wrong, and you need to explain why you were wrong. He's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't. Name one thing that he did that was wrong in allowing the accuser to be wrong, because he was ultimately wrong. Job stayed. It was hard, but he stayed with his faith. And if you actually look at the story the way I said it in the beginning, which is, this is somebody who he knew God, but he didn't trust or believe in God. It wasn't a personal relationship. And by the time it was done, this is now a personal relationship. So Job grew in the darkness. This is what God does all the time with us. We don't grow when it's light. We grow when it's dark, when we're going through something, when we're having struggles. That's when we're growing. So God is going, great. You want to give him troubles? He's just going to grow in faith, not lose it. And it's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And you can see it right in the end of the book of Job too, where Job answers the Lord after the Lord asks him a bunch of questions, which I always think of, this is an aside, but I always think of those questions that God asks. And he says, gird yourself like a man, because I'm going to ask you some hard questions now. You've had your go at me. I'm going to have my go at you. But there's also a tint, if not even an overture of compassion, where it's like, where were you when I did this? I did this stuff. Can you count the number of these? And this thing went this far and no further, and I'm the only one who prevented that. In other words, Job, I know you know these things, and you can't fathom what it takes to do those things. So what I'm asking you to do is to trust me that the things you don't know and can't possibly know, I've got. And then Job, in his humility, once he sees this and God appears to him out of the whirlwind, he says, I know you can do all things, and no purposes of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? And he goes on and he says, therefore I uttered things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me. And that things too wonderful for me, I often think to myself that when we've gone through our sufferings, and I've gone through my unfair share and my fair share, based on my own sin in my own life and some stuff quite recently, I think to myself, if I ask the why question, which is not an illegitimate question, but the idea that I'm entitled to know based on the limited knowledge I can't possibly have. I'm not infinite and I'm not perfect, and God wouldn't make a perfect being, because a perfect being by definition can't be made. He's got to self-exist. What makes me think I'm capable of handling the answer if it was given to me? If it was given to me, it might be, as Job said, too wonderful for me to know. Like you can't possibly fathom it. And then he says, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear. And to your point, David, but now my eyes see you. Now, the whole point is that now Job has relationship, not just knowledge about, but knowledge of. And that's so poignant as well. I think that's important. The other thing that occurs to me with Megan O'Gieblin's question, as powerful and as understandable as the question is it's a moral question. It's
yes.
Job was entitled to something, and he wasn't given, and that's unfair. In your study, familiar with apologetics and understanding these kind of things, what's your take on the? Is there something being borrowed, as it were, from a Christian worldview or from a theistic worldview about it's unfair, objectively unfair? What's the issue there? Because you said yes, so I know you're onto what I'm talking about here. What do you think is sort of the inherent assumption being made when someone says it's unfair and it shouldn't be that way? Well, the shouldn't is important.
Yeah, I think, as Christians, we say stuff like, hey, love is not static. It grows as we do. Spiritual growth is not measured in years, but it's measured in communion, in relationship. And I think with people, when they're going through something unfortunate in their life and they don't have the understanding of what's going on, they start to point fingers and blame. And I think then what happens is you have somebody on one side going, I understand you're going through this is for your growth. The other person going, I don't care about the growth part. I'm going through this right now. I want the understanding of what's going on. And neither one of them are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not on the same plane at the same time. And what that writer at that moment needs is not really an answer. She's not looking for an answer. It's not about Job. It's about her. Something happened with her that caused her to feel like she didn't get an answer when something terrible happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all understand that at those moments, we want the wisdom. This also comes from, ancient Jewish teachings. This is the Talmud and the Midrash. Adam and Eve, who ate of the fruit, if you actually read some of the Talmud and the Midrash, they have this wild concept that the Adam and Eve would have been given the fruit of knowledge from God if they were more patient. That they were given, hey, here is the entire world. Here are all the animals you're in charge of. You're brand new. You don't know anything. I will give you the knowledge of everything, just not yet. And because we were impatient, we grabbed it. I don't think that's changed very much. I think with us, we go, I don't understand it right now. I need it right now. I'm going to try to grab it. And what happens is we keep grabbing the wrong fruit. We keep grabbing the thing we're not supposed to be grabbing, and we fall into this pit of, this doesn't make sense. I don't like the answer. There should be an answer, versus, I just don't know yet. Let me hang back. Let me learn. Let me read. Let me explore a little bit. And in time, and I'm the worst person to give this advice, because I'm constantly moving and running and doing. One of the things you talk about, not hearing the audible voice of God when you first accepted him. I tell people all the time, I have never heard the audible voice of God. And there are people who said they have.
Mm-hmm.
And my reasoning, they go, well, why do you think that is? Because I don't shut up long enough to listen to him. I'm constantly moving.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people have told me, if you just have some silent time, you might have some chance for some back and forth with him. I'm going, you're probably right, but he also made me this way. He created me this way. So he knows he's got to get me on the run, because I'm moving.
That's funny. That's good. That's good. Well, I want to get to the point of, and one of the things that I would say too on that before we move on is, and this is an important part, because a huge part of your story is the atheism section of your life. So I brought her up for a reason, and that whole that oughtness, like Job ought to have been given an answer, suggests a moral fabric to the universe on an objective basis. And if there is no God, then it's just opinion. There's no ought in it. It's just, it would have been nice for him to have done that. But if you're going to assume the ought, he ought to have given them an answer, then you assume a moral fabric that doesn't exist absent a God who makes the oughtness even possible in the first place. So I want to, if I could pivot though, because my guess is what people are really looking forward to having our conversation about, given our various backgrounds, is Judaism in your identity as being fulfilled now in being a Christian. So I want to swing to that part of it now, because you went from atheism to going to a church, and your Jewish background. One of the ways you describe on your website, you mention yourself that you came from an Orthodox Jewish family, but that you bring to the text, the biblical text, an Israelite perspective. Not Israeli, not Jewish, Israelite. Having talked to you for a few seconds here, well, more than a few seconds, you choose your words. So my guess is Israelites on purpose. It's not a typo. So what do you think is the major difference sort of between an Israelite perspective and perhaps a Jewish perspective?
So you have, and this people use all the time. They don't know whether to use Hebrew, Israelite, Jewish.
Right.
And Hebrew is actually the word used at the time of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Hebrew. Then it became an Israelite, this is the nation of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
This is from the tribes, the southern tribe that survived is Israel. And then you have Jewish, which is the religious depiction of who we are following. And with that one, it's interesting because the word Jewish, I think that Jewish people fight within their different denominations probably more than Christians do People just don't know about it. We're really good at hiding it.
Yeah.
But the word Jewish I don't use very often because then it's, well, what kind of Jew are you?
Right.
That's the first question you get. I'm going, why does it matter
Yeah.
if we're both Jewish? So Israelite is very, very specific. And to me, this is a people that were the majority of the Bible. These were Israelite people that were in the desert at the time of Moses. These were the Israelites who, were kicked out and by Babylon. These are the Israelites that during the 400 years of silence, which I still don't understand. I get the prophet part, but there was nothing silent about 400 years. But 400 years of silence. These are the Israelites that were there when Jesus was there. So these are Israelites, and I identify myself with that more than any other because I'm not a religious Jew, and I'm also not a Hebrew, which I just feel is not specific enough to who I am. I was an Israelite.
I see. So if we take an Israelite perspective, so to speak, of the Bible, let's talk about what it means to, if I could get your opinion on this, and I want to get into the specifics of the incarnation and understanding that, because that's a huge stumbling block for Muslims. I know it's a huge stumbling block for lots of Jews. God doesn't have a body, as it were. When you look at Jewish synagogue literature and hymns, the God doesn't have a body. So there's that issue there. So I want to get to that in a second, but help us as Christians think about the Torah and what should the role of Torah be in sort of Christian life today? People often read Jesus saying, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, as if abolish and law are being used synonymously. Like I abolished which would be a strange statement because he didn't come to abolish it, but to fulfill it. People often, I should say this, let me rephrase the question. People often use the word fulfill and abolish as if it's synonymous. Like, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, as if he was saying, I came not to abolish the law, but to abolish it, which doesn't make any sense. So in light of that, what does it mean in Jesus for the law to be fulfilled from an Israelite's perspective?
I think there's a lot of things that as I meet different Christians, they don't understand about Levitical law. And just as I didn't understand how Christians live their life, it wasn't so much what I know or don't know. It was what was readily available to me. And what was readily available to me was that Christians hated me because I killed Jesus. And for Levitical law, what a lot of people hear are these debates of, well, if this is what you believe, then you also believe this, which comes from the same Levitical law back this many thousands of years ago. And because you don't follow it and all of that, and it gets politicized versus looking at the beauty of what God did with these laws. And there are two things about the laws. One is, if you really look at some of these laws, they're meant for our safety. These are laws that, if you look at running, cleaning yourself under running water, back then it would have been, hey, this is a law that we have to follow God gave us. And there was a German scientist, Semmelweis, who actually discovered that if you wash your hands under running water, you can save tons of women who are about to give birth. So there is a beautiful necessity for following the law when it comes to our safety, our hygiene, things like that. Being said, there are a lot of laws, and there are a lot of people who go, there's no way I'm going to follow all these laws. And I'm saying, you know what? You're right. And neither did the Israelites, which is why we have Yom Kippur, which is why we have ways of atoning for our sins, because part of what God did is, I'm going to make it so difficult for you to follow laws, you're going to need me. You can't just follow these laws and then not need me ever again. It's no, follow the laws, and then when you fall, I'm here to catch you. So I think it's really important to learn that these laws have tremendous benefit for us, but it doesn't mean that following them or not following them, that's the crux of the Christian faith. Jesus is, but realizing that, first of all, it's amazing he was able to fulfill all the laws because there's a lot of them and they're very complicated. And it just shows how brilliant and amazing he was in order to do that. That was a God thing on its own. But more than that, that he's pointing to the fact that these are good laws. These aren't laws that were meant to harm somebody. These were laws to set a body apart. I'm setting you apart from all these other groups back then
Right.
that were doing things that were not hygienic or that were cruel and evil to each other. This was setting you apart. I'm still setting you apart. I'm just setting you apart with a new covenant where you don't have to follow the laws exactly. I'm not abolishing them, but the law is being replaced with me, with your belief in me. And the ultimate law that was given was love me, love your neighbor as yourself. Believe me, that is hard enough in itself that just about every person in this entire world fails every day.
Oh, yeah. And we're seeing evidence of that more and more. No matter all you need to. I once said to somebody, if you doubt the doctrine of original sin, just open your device and look at your feed, and you'll get a ton of confirmation about the fact that we have a hard time loving each other, as you just said. When I look at because many of these things pointed to a Messiah as well. Many of these things pointed not only to the separation. Paul Copan points out that when you look at some of the laws about not mixing threads or not, even the dietary laws, as helpful as they were for sanitation and for hygiene and well-being, a lot of those had to do with, like, don't mix with these people in terms of their religious systems, because when you do that, you're going to start worshiping their gods, and you're the people through whom the Messiah is to come. So I'm protecting that sacredness of this covenant I've made with you for this ultimate fulfillment for the benefit of all people. But the fulfillment also comes to where those things that, like the sacrificial system, those things that were pointing to something have now been fulfilled in the sense that Jesus is now the fulfillment of the things that were pointing to him. So those things no longer need to be practiced because that which fulfills it has come, and he himself has come. So we don't need to sacrifice bulls and goats anymore, and doves and pigeons and the wave offerings and these kind of things, because, well, the Messiah has fulfilled the ultimate sacrifice. What those were pointing to anyway was the washing away, not the washing away, but the covering of sin. And now it's been been washed away. But
yeah, if you look at when you bring up the different cloths, if you look at that, they've even proven scientifically that there's a different magnetic pulse from mixing those two. So negative energy versus positive energy. And they have some scientific evidence that if you mix those two fabrics, it does have a negative effect on your body.
That's interesting.
So even that one, you're going, well, why would he say that? And people always on debates go right to that one.
Yeah.
And you go, actually, God kind of knew what he was talking about. The other thing that I think people are surprised at is when they talk about Jewish people and they go, they reject Jesus as the Messiah. That's actually not necessarily true. So at that time, the Pharisees were looking for Messiah. There were actually a lot of fake messiahs at the time.
Yes.
During that time period, there were people who were saying that they were the Messiah, and the Pharisees were not against it. They were actually, now the Sadducees were different.
Yeah.
They were, you have to be at the temple. The Pharisees were actually, hey, you can worship in your own town. We're waiting for the Messiah. They were actually waiting for two of them. It was Mashiach ben Joseph and Mashiach ben David. So it was the suffering one and the one who was going to be the king like David. So they were waiting for one. The problem happened when Jesus said that he was not only a Messiah, but God.
Yeah.
And that's the funny part when everyone says, well, Jesus never said he was God. I'm going, if you knew Jews back then and you knew the language, of course he did, because they were actually okay with him saying he was the Messiah. It was literally when he said, I'm God, and they go, whoa, wait a minute. There's no way God would come down in human form. Now it's sacrilegious. Now you're saying something against God, and now you deserve death. So it wasn't that they were rejecting Jesus, the Messiah. They were rejecting Jesus, the God Messiah.
Yeah.
And then there were other things that the Messiah did not do. They were expecting him to do. That's in the Old Testament, and rightfully so. But Jesus has, as in the second coming, he will fulfill these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've written in other places before about Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph. And Jesus is like, yep, I'm both. You're not waiting for a sequential thing. You're actually waiting in some senses for simultaneous thing in one sense, because the Messiah ben David, when he comes back, will do the things that they were looking forward to. But
Yes.
in one sense, he was the king over death and over the consequences of sin, but he suffered to do it. And you look at the Jewish tradition and you see that there were various understandings of what the Messiah might do, but these are the two rubrics in which the Pharisees especially were looking for.
Yeah.
So the idea of the incarnation, this is interesting because James White, the Christian apologist James White, was debating a couple of Unitarian Christians, or Unitarians. I don't know if I would call them Christians because I'm not sure I would think a Unitarian as a Christian, because I think the Trinity is pretty important, and also the incarnation of God in Christ. He pointed out that in Hebrew, the diacritical marks, and just so folks know, a diacritical mark is when you look at Hebrew or you look at Arabic and Semitic languages, oftentimes the form of the vowels and the consonants are there, but what differentiates them from each other are oftentimes these dots or these slash marks that differentiate the consonants from each other, and sometimes the vowels from other consonants. James White points out that in the Masoretic text, for example, Psalm 110, verse 1, it says, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool at your feet." The word is Adonai and Adoni. And James White points out that the diacritical marks were that what he says is that those diacritical marks that were made to make those two words different aren't actually there, aren't supposed to be there. So Lord, capital L, and Lord, lowercase l, aren't actually different, and that the notion of the two powers in heaven is a legitimate thing. It's not a Christian invention, as it were. And I've heard also there are other people like I want to say Daniel Boyarin and other guys' name I'm forgetting, who mentioned that this idea that there was at least a binitarian view of God as a possibility, it was in Judaism. It pre-existed Jesus' day, so it wasn't like a Greek invention or a Hellenistic invention. Do you have an idea about that? About the whole idea of Trinitarian hints in the Old Testament?
There are definitely Trinitarian hints. When you go back and you look at it, and obviously the one that everyone points to is the first name of God in the Bible was Elohim, which means multiple gods and things like that. I think when it comes to, here's the problem with Hebrew. A lot of times so Isaiah 7:14 talks about, the virgin birth. And if you talk to somebody who studies Hebrew and is a Jewish person, he says, no, it's actually young woman. It's not virgin, it's young woman. And if you look at the word Bereshit in ancient Hebrew, pictograph Hebrew, you will discover that it seems to imply Jesus is coming by those letters. If you look at the names from Adam to Noah, it talks about, the God coming down and all of that. And it's all there, and then it's all not, because the way Jewish people talk about Hebrew, you can have 4 different experts saying 4 different things, and you have to go there and say, okay, Elohim, is it really multiple gods, or is it one God? Who's he talking to? If we're talking about days, and was it 6 literal days? It has the word day, but it really doesn't really mean day, because, is it a 24-hour day? That doesn't specify, because this letter's not here. And it is just filled in the Old Testament. And what I've discovered in my understanding of some Hebrew, not ancient Hebrew, definitely not as an expert, but understanding of the Hebrew that I grew up with and understanding the New Testament, is there is nothing in the New Testament that goes against what the Old Testament is saying. There are things that might not have happened yet. We talked about the Messiah, that the second coming and what he'll fulfill. But when you look at the things that were fulfilled, they are mathematically impossible. Mathematically impossible that one man would have fulfilled all of those different prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. There are more than enough proof and evidence And the way I tell people is everyone wants the one smoking gun.
Mm-hmm.
I want that one word that says Trinity in it that I can lean my weight on and go, see, I told you.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is you have 100 different things that allude to it. And I'm saying, how many do you need before it's true?
Yeah.
How many of these facts do you need? How many pieces of evidence do I need? Listen, my book, Jesus Christ, a lot of evidence. How many pieces of evidence do you require, non-believer,
Mm-hmm.
in order to believe?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a brain issue. More time than not, it's a heart issue.
Yeah.
And what people are doing is, right now I'm telling you, hey, red Corvette. When you leave today, you're going to see at least 3 red Corvettes. Anybody who's listening to this or watching this, they're going to go and see 3 red Corvettes today because I said it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens is when people start talking about the Trinity and Unitarianism, and people are going to see it the way they want to see it in that moment. And the goal is not to.
Yeah.
It's to read it, step away,
Mm-hmm.
go back, read it again and say, am I still reading it the same way? The whole purpose of the Living Bible is it keeps changing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you that over the 12 or so years since I've accepted Christ, there's never been a doubt in my mind that there's a Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Never
Mm-hmm.
a doubt in my mind. It's never changed. In fact, it's gotten stronger with some of the language that I do read from the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Yeah. And I want to make sure, just for clarity's sake, is that what you're not saying, David, is, because I think some of these things do get misinterpreted, and we'll get an email from somebody who says, David said the Bible changes with you, and therefore your interpretation is what rules with the Bible. You're not saying that. Is that oftentimes as you grow, you'll see new things that were always already there. The text isn't changing, and your interpretation isn't the master of the text. It's the other way around. The text should master your interpretation, and as you mature, you'll see that. So make sure that, correct. Yeah, you're not. Yeah, I've been there, done that, where I've said something like that. I'm like, now my radar's up to make sure. But that's clearly not what you're saying. But
no. But I think that there is an understanding that, listen, interpretation has been done by a million people
Mm-hmm.
throughout the ages, and some agree and some disagree with them. What people do, for the most part, yes, there are a few people over the history of time who try to interpret things for their own gain. But for the most part, when I look at interpretation, and there are times where I interpret the Bible myself, I have gotten to a position in my life where I want to read the Bible and interpret it for myself. And I am okay knowing that at some point when I go to heaven and I ask Jesus, hey, was I right about this? I'm fully expecting to go, you were way off. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I think that when we try to translate it, it's for his glory. It's trying to do the best that we can
Right.
for him and understanding him. And I think that sets it apart from somebody doing it for their own purpose, their own glory, their own power. So when I use biblical interpretations, whether it's from the Midrash and the Talmud, which is not the Torah,
Mm-hmm.
these are sages that wrote about what they thought about it. There are some things you'll read about that you go, where'd they even come up with that?
Yeah.
Where Adam and Eve literally lived 970 years,
Mm-hmm.
not 1,000, because they gifted 30 years to David because they saw that David was going to die at birth,
Oh.
King David.
Yeah.
It's written in there. I don't know where they got it from.
Yeah.
That's their interpretation of it. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to lean my belief on Jesus Christ on what the belief about Adam and Eve's lifespan was.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think you're right. When somebody says the living Bible and it changes, I should be more careful with the wording and saying it's not that the words changed, the interpretations have changed. But it is God's word, and we try our best every day to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when one of the greatest things that happen is if I look at something and go, this doesn't seem right, it's usually because my understanding is wrong and not because the words aren't right. God's word is perfect.
Right. And
My understanding is not. And it might take years for me to get to that point to go,
Yeah.
there it is.
yeah, and there's plenty of
And like I said, there it is. He'll probably go, no, you're still wrong,
yeah.
but I love you anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I've been a believer for 25 years now, and there are some things that I've seen that I'm like, oh my goodness, that is just genius. How could I not seen it before? But the first thing I saw wasn't wrong. It just was not everything. And then sometimes I'm like, why did I believe that about that before? It's like, I had that on a superficial level and it just didn't apply. And sometimes we apply scriptures to ourselves that are really not promises to us. It's promises to certain people at certain times. But the sentiment is true and that kind of stuff. So so let's talk about, in the few minutes we have remaining, I want to just talk about Jesus as the fulfillment of that which you were searching for, in terms of, because he was that for me. And coming from our different backgrounds, and the poetry of the idea that a Lebanese former Shia Muslim found Christ, and a former Orthodox Jewish believer finds Christ, and you find that sense of fulfillment because he draws you to him, and you have that relationship with God. For me, it was that fulfillment of that which I was hoping was true in one worldview was actually true in this worldview, which is that God is truly great, and the greatest possible being would express the greatest possible virtue, which is love, in the greatest possible way, which is self-sacrifice, and that's exactly what the cross is. For you, what is that linchpin thing that makes Jesus so compelling, given your background and the journey you went from Judaism to atheism to Christianity?
So it's funny. I'll start off with, because we were talking about AI earlier. I'll tell you why AI has me a little bit skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling a little down one day, and I wrote on, and I never use AI, and I wrote on AI, and I just said, hey, this is what's going on in my life, and what information, I'm a Christian, and this is who I am, and what information do you have to make me feel better? And it gave me this little synopsis of how I should feel better. And then at the very end, it said, don't forget, Jesus has you, and so do I. Literally, AI said, Jesus has you, and so do I.
That's interesting.
And I was like, all right, that is not what I expected. And I say that only because in a life filled with, looking back now, when I thought I was okay, life was filled with pain. And it's the one thing that I can identify with a lot of people is I experienced pain of not feeling like I belong. And now becoming a Christian, and now my family really says I don't belong. The pain of self-esteem and self-confidence issues, to the point where I would rather have 40 tattoos drilled on my body than look at myself in the mirror. Pain that I've experienced in my family of hatred from a father when he should be loving, and all the different things that I've experienced in life. And when AI, the only thing it got right, when it said that Jesus has got you, that was it. That as much as I tried to, so my quick brief, the reason I got into apologetics was, as a martial artist, the one thing I hear all the time is, oh, when I was a kid, I took martial arts. Oh, I used to take martial arts. And I started hearing that from Christian people. Oh, I used to go to church. I used to be Christian. I used to go to, to Sunday school. And I was so terrified that I finally got Jesus in my life that I was going to somehow lose him. So what I said was, I need to learn the logical side. So when my heart goes down, my brain will kick in, and vice versa. And what I've realized over this time was that it's not my brain at all. It's my heart. Everything that God came to, everything about him was my heart. And he took me. Are we still together?
We are.
Hey, sorry, I thought
there was a bit of a pause there, but yeah, keep going.
Okay, that God has me, and he's always got me. He's always had me. He's led me through parts of my life simply for the fact that I can now minister better to others going through pain. I can now identify myself no longer as the tattooed extreme fighter, but as son of Jesus. And that's the most compelling thing that he did. And when I look at the Old Testament as a Jew now, and I'm going, he's been doing this from the beginning of time. He wasn't an afterthought. He wasn't these humans messed up, so now I have to figure out a plan. He was the plan from the very beginning. He was the plan in my life from the very beginning, and he's got me. And man, there's nothing more powerful for me than knowing that. And it's funny because one of the things I teach is that your testimony can never be debated. But your testimony also is hard for somebody else to understand because they haven't gone through it. And they're going, well, I went through a hard time, so why isn't he showing up for me?
Mm-hmm.
And all I know is that either he hasn't yet or you haven't identified it yet, but he loves you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just take a moment and see the different things that happen in your life and where you are today, and in fact, you even have the question of, why isn't he coming for me?
Mm-hmm.
Means that he is.
Yeah.
He's right there.
Yeah.
He's put that thought is in your brain and he's going, you're right there. Come on, just step over the line.
Yeah.
I am here for you. And Jesus came for me. What more do I need?
Yeah.
I am a dyslexic disaster of a person who has turned into somebody who can proudly tell my story and be proud of being a child of Christ, having lost almost all of my family to that notion, and actually feeling okay about it. And that shouldn't have been me because I didn't feel okay about anything in my life. And I feel okay about this because Jesus has me.
Well, that goes back to that, the cost. We started off with the whole cost issue and what does it cost to become a believer? And ultimately, it might cost you everything. It might cost you something small, but it costs you something. But whatever it is, no matter how great or how small, whatever you lose is often is overcompensated by the one you gain. And it's not just a what; it's the one you gain. As we wrap up, David, I just think about the fact that you have this fulfillment of the Passover in who Christ actually is, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, so that death could pass over us. And you see whether it's in the seders and the afikomen and even the piercings and the matzah and the stripes, and you're like, oh my goodness, this poetry is just written in the pen of history. It's remarkable, and I just thank God for your story, that he drew you. If there was a Jewish person who was watching this or listening to this, and there are, again, what kind of Jew, Reform, Rabbinic, a little more secularized, Orthodox, I don't know. I mean, the chances of an Orthodox Jew watching this are kind of on the small side, but boy, I would hope that would be the case. What would you say to somebody who has a strong sense of their Jewish identity and also has a strong sense that to be Jewish is to not believe in Jesus? What would you say to that person if you had 2 minutes to tell them something about why that's just not true?
Oh boy, that's a tough one because as a Jewish person, I would not have heard anybody speaking to me about Christianity. But the only thing, and going back to the testimony, is if you look at me, if you look at somebody who was born in an Orthodox Ashkenazi family that went through Torah study, that did everything right, the only reason I found myself here in my life through the dyslexia, through everything else I've been through, the only way I could come here is from the power of God. And the power of God was Jesus Christ. And this is time and time again, he has continued to show himself to me in different ways, continue to do miracles for me. And more than that is when you start to reconcile some of the things that aren't being taught in yeshiva, such as Isaiah 53.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the suffering servant who's pierced for our transgressions, that is not something that is taught. It's not even mentioned. If you talk to a lot of Orthodox Jews and ask them about it, they don't know it. And the reason is we're not taught, and there's a reason for that. There's a very big reason why we're not taught something, because we're being shielded from the truth. And it might not be on purpose. There's nothing, that's done purposely to hurt us. It is just, there is their belief system and there's my belief system. And my belief system is Jesus Christ and the things that he's done for me, you, Abdu, when you start looking at the different cultures, they're really not that different.
Yeah.
And there are so many amazing overlaps. And in the middle of all of that is Jesus literally standing there saying, I'm the fulfillment of all of it. I am literally here, the fulfillment. So I think for a Jewish person, just take a moment, put down the prayer book, pick up a Bible, a full Bible, and just read it one time. That's it. If you don't believe after that, then that's a journey you have to take. But you're making a judgment call based on information that you've never actually studied. So it is impossible for you to make the determination based on something you've never read. Just read, learn it, reach out. If you're Orthodox and you want to reach out to me, to you, to somebody, it's probably the worst advice that I think this question could ever be answered, because I'm filled in my head with so many reasons of why I wouldn't have. But I will tell you that God will lead you there. Jesus will lead you where you need to go. And I truly believe that there are a lot of Orthodox Jews that have a question in their brain because Jesus is tugging at them.
Yeah.
And they just need to go along a little bit with the tug, just a little, not big. You don't have to jump into believer. Just read one passage, one line, and see where your heart leads you. And if you talk about my poetic life and my heart, that's the same poetry that God will lay on everybody's life.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Appreciate it so much. And so typically Derek asked me for my closing argument as part of All Rise. I'm just going to leave a couple of thoughts here. Ladies and gentlemen, having heard David's story and his plea to just give it a read, it's a truism of human experience that when you're a kid and when your parents say, don't go into the forbidden closet of mystery, the forbidden closet of mystery becomes incredibly compelling. So if they're saying don't read Isaiah 53, or they don't mention Isaiah 53, there's probably a reason for that. So you probably should feel compelled to go read Isaiah chapter 53 and see what that's about. And then take that and then read the life of Jesus. And you might see an eerie similarity. And you look at the historical evidence of what happened to Jesus of Nazareth, that no scholars debate, that even Bart Ehrman, the great skeptic, will, and I mean in terms of the level of his skepticism being great, even he would say all these things outside the resurrection happened to Jesus. In Psalm 22, and the way that really is translated, as pierced for our transgressions, and you see all these things, as David already said, the fulfillment of so many things that are in the scriptures and have always been there. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would implore you, if you're someone who's looking into this thing and seeing the Jewish roots of this whole thing, or want to know if they are there, look into the forbidden closet of Isaiah 53, and then look at the other forbidden closet that's often forbidden to us, the Gospels themselves, and I think you'll find something quite remarkable, and you'll come to your own conclusions, your own verdict. Our guest has been David Shapiro. You can find out more at Dr. David Shapiro. That's Dr. DavidShapiro.org. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have you on, and we could go on, and maybe we will go on in another episode. But it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. David, I hope we can have you on All Rise again. All the best to you and your efforts and your ministry. One of these days we'll meet in person, and we'll compare heights, because you're a tall guy, I'm a tall guy. We both come from communities that aren't historically tall. You're a martial artist. I was a martial artist, and maybe we'll become a superhero duo. Who knows? But for the time being, we'll point to the one superhero we both believe in, who is the Lord himself. So thanks again, David, for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
Love it. Thank you so much, Abdu. Appreciate it.
You bet. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense rests.